Hello and welcome to Class 5 of Women in the Classics. This class will focus on the women of Troy. Most people have heard of Troy and the Trojan War, and especially the Trojan horse that the Greeks used to sneak into the city and defeat them. The brilliant horse plan was hatched by the infamous Odysseus, as usual. After 10 years' war, Odysseus and his fellow Greeks gifted the Trojans this wooden horse sculpture, upon an inscription which read, "For their return home, the Greeks dedicate this offering to Athena." The Trojans took the horse into the city. Little did they know a group of the Greeks' best soldiers were hiding inside. That night, when they jumped out, they opened the gates and sacked the city of Troy. Fun fact, the makers of the 2004 movie Troy donated their Trojan horse prop to the city of Canacauli near the actual ruins of ancient Troy. It stands on their waterfront to this day. Most of what we know about the Trojan War comes from the ancient texts like the Odyssey and the Iliad, both by Homer. Ilium is the ancient name for Troy, hence the title, the Iliad. Homer wrote these texts in the 7th or 8th century BCE, and they were based on oral histories recounting events that had taken place in the 12th or 13th centuries BCE. The War of Troy began when Helen of Sparta, who was the wife of Menelaus and considered the most beautiful woman in the world, either ran away with or was kidnapped by Paris, Prince of Troy, after he had visited Sparta on an ambassadorial mission along with his brother, Hector. This insult was enough to rouse Menelaus' brother, Agamemnon, who was king of Mycenae. Together, they amassed a Greek army and sailed across the Aegean to Troy. Unfortunately, it's more likely that the abduction or elopement of Helen was simply an excuse. An excuse for Agamemnon and his army to gain more territory and sack what was, at that time, one of the richest cities in the world. Helen herself gets very little airtime in the Iliad, or any of the sources that recount the tale of Troy. She is depicted as a prize to be won. When Menelaus loses her, he is not upset because he loves her, he is upset because he has been stolen from. In fact, Helen has had very little agency through any of the proceedings of events. You might remember the judgment of Paris from Lesson 1, in which Prince Paris of Troy was asked by 3 goddesses, Aphrodite, Athena, and Hera, to decide which one of them was the most beautiful. They each promise Paris different rewards. Athena promises victory in war. Hera promises to make Paris king of all men. Aphrodite promises the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen. When Paris chooses Aphrodite, she casts a love spell on Helen, forcing her to fall in love with Paris. Helen never had any choice in any of it. In war in ancient Greece, women were seen as prizes, literally. When cities were sacked, warriors would receive women as rewards for bravery and accomplishment in battle. This meant that the great soldiers could collect many women, or concubines. The higher the rank of the woman, or the more beautiful she was, the greater the honor for the warrior. Briseis was one of these high-ranking women. Not only was she a member of the Trojan royal family, she was also a priestess, and very beautiful by all accounts. She was taken as a prize when Achilles sacked the temple. She, like Helen, also played a pivotal role in the War of Troy, without any choice in the matter. In the Iliad, Agamemnon takes as his prize a young priestess of Apollo called Chryseis. Her father, a priest of Apollo, comes to ask for her back and offers much gold in return. Agamemnon says no. So, the priest calls upon Apollo to bring a plague upon the Greek camp, which he does. Many Greeks die, and the army is losing hope. Achilles approaches Agamemnon and tells him it is his fault that the plague is upon them and that he should return Chryseis to her father. Agamemnon, called out, agrees to do so, but says that he will take Briseis, Achilles' prize, in Chryseis' place. This leads to Achilles and his army refusing to fight. Without Achilles, the Greek army suffers enormous defeats. Eventually, the Trojans breach the Greek camp and begin burning the ships. An embassy is sent to Achilles in which he is offered a plethora of riches, including the return of Briseis, if only he will return to fight. He refuses. This is the best evidence we have that this is not a love story. Achilles is not upset because he has lost the woman he loved. He's upset that he has been stolen from. His pride is wounded, not his heart. He sends Briseis back to Agamemnon with the embassy, knowing that she will likely be raped and abused. At this point, Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, tries to convince Achilles to rejoin the battle. But having failed, kind-hearted Patroclus decides to go into battle dressed in Achilles' armor, in an attempt to scare the Trojans and rally the Greeks. Patroclus' plan works, but he gets too carried away and ends up getting killed by Hector, Prince of Troy. It is the death of Patroclus, not the loss or offer of return of Briseis, that prompts Achilles back to battle. Achilles kills Hector, out of spite, drags his body around behind his chariot for days. Achilles' return to battle turns the tide for the Greeks. He dies before the war is won, but there is no doubt that they would have lost without him. Eventually, with Odysseus' horse, the Greeks sack Troy and take Helen along with all of the other women they find, back to Greece. So, as you can see, the War of Troy is not a love story. We often hear romanticized reductions of the women of Troy. Helen, the woman of 1,000 ships sailed for. Or Briseis, the woman who brought an army to its knees. Or Briseis, the woman who brought an army to its knees. In fact, these women were powerless pawns in a man's game. If you're interested in hearing more about the women of Troy from fresh perspectives, we recommend these books. Thanks for watching, and be sure to come back for Lesson 6, Cleopatra.